Welcome to the Korea Pro podcast. I'm your host, Jeongmin Kim, the editorial director of Korea Pro.
And I'm John Lee, the editor of Korea Pro.
Join us for a weekly 15-minute conversation as we dive into the most pressing stories shaping South Korea and dissect the most complicated ones for you.
From politics to culture, technology to society, we've got you covered. So stay ahead of the curve and never be sidelined again.
So get ready for a fresh perspective on South Korea's news. This is the Korea Pro podcast.
All right, welcome back to the Korea Pro podcast. It is now Thursday, July 18, and it is rainy outside, but here we are as always to bring you the latest episode.
And there are a lot of security-related and trade-related news coming in this week. And let's start with nuclear power plant. South Korea's KHNP, which is Korea Hydro Nuclear Power, has been selected as a preferred bidder to build 2 nuclear power plant units in the Czech Republic.
Yeah, this announcement came out late last night, around 9:20.
There was like a briefing from the trade minister and other officials this morning, and you can see from the back brief note that the reporters all start their remarks with, "Oh, congratulations, this is a big deal for South Korea."
Yeah, now this project is going to be quite a lot of money. It's worth 24 trillion won, which comes up to about $17.4 billion. And this has been a long time coming. Now, South Korea, as some of our listeners may be aware, has been trying to export nuclear power plants since the Yoon administration came into power. His goal has been to export 10 nuclear power plants by 2030. We're not quite sure if we will ever actually hit that mark. Exporting nuclear power plants is not nearly the same as trying to export tanks, for example.
South Koreans just prefer goals that end with 5 or 0.
Exactly. And so that was the goal. And we have to remember, though, that this is the first really big nuclear power plant export since 2009, when South Korea exported the Baraka nuclear power plants to the UAE.
Right.
And so this is going to be a boost in the arm for not just for KHNP, but for all the other companies in the sector.
So there has been a lawsuit with a U.S. company. And
Westinghouse.
How does that sort of come into this picture?
Okay, so for context, Westinghouse had sued KHNP and KEPCO for intellectual property rights. The power plant's reactor that KHNP had exported was the APR 1400. Now, what Westinghouse is saying is that that's their proprietary technology and that South Korea does not have the right to export that outside of the South Korean market. Now, South Korea has countered that this is their own technology, that they do not need to get permission from Westinghouse or from the U.S. government to export this technology. And so Westinghouse sued KHNP in October 2022.
On the grounds of the intellectual property rights.
On the grounds of this. Almost a year later, in September of 2023, a U.S. court sided with the South Korean companies.
Right, this was a big news last year.
This was huge. And Westinghouse, of course, said that they would appeal.
Did they?
And they have not. They've been very quiet about this until yesterday. When this announcement was made, Westinghouse...
About the Czech Republic.
About the Czech Republic. Westinghouse again made that statement that South Korea does not have the authorization to export this outside of South Korea. And so it's very likely that they're going to try to appeal to the U.S. court again this time around.
But it's to delay it mostly.
Well, we don't know what the eventual goal is. Now, there are several different scenarios. The first goal is, now we have to remember that Westinghouse was also one of the bidders for the Czech Republic, but their bid was rejected by the Czech government in January.
So who was the actual competitor in the bid this time?
Was EDF, a French nuclear power plant company.
Why did they lose?
Apparently, from what I read, the French company EDF tried to export a new technology.
So more expensive.
Which was more expensive. And so as cost effectiveness is always a factor, KHNP was chosen as the preferred negotiating partner. But anyway, because Westinghouse was rejected, I'm sure they've been quite sore about this. And so Westinghouse will likely have several different objectives. For Westinghouse, ideally, they would like to see the court side with them and reject South Korea's ability to export this technology. If that happens, I'm sure that Westinghouse and EDF and other companies might try to go for another bid in the Czech Republic. And hopefully, Westinghouse would, at least from their perspective, win the bid this time around. Another potential option is if Westinghouse still cannot get the U.S. court to side with them, then they might try to enter into some sort of a partnership with KHNP. Or, worst case scenario for Westinghouse, they're just going to try to delay this as much as possible.
Knowing that they can't win.
Knowing that they can't win, so that while in the meantime, while the court case is ongoing, South Korean companies still cannot export the nuclear power plants, and Westinghouse can.
There are some political and diplomatic factors into those scenarios as well, which complicates the prediction. One is the South Korean side administration change, and second is the U.S. side administration change. With the first one, it's well known that the progressive administration in South Korea has not been keen in the past about nuclear power plants. But what about right now?
Well, we don't really have to worry about South Korean administration changes. Sure, the progressives have been opposed to nuclear energy.
But it's more about in South Korea.
Exactly. They have no problem exporting it.
Right.
The problem is what happens in the US. Now, sure, when it comes to nuclear energy and exports, this is a matter of billions upon billions of dollars. And the South Korea and the US are allies, of course. But when it comes to business, money's money. And so there will be disagreements that we cannot expect complete alignment. But what might actually tilt this in favor is if Trump becomes president.
What might happen if Trump comes back?
Well, we have to remember that he's always had that America first, I don't want to say philosophy because that
sounds
supposes
smarter.
that he has an idea, this America first bumper sticker that Trump has always promoted. So whether it's defense or whether it's protecting American intellectual property or American business interests, Trump has always sided with America first. And so if there's a change in the administration, while sure, the courts and the executive branch in the U.S. are completely separate, but I'm sure that Westinghouse will try to get Trump to use his speeches, use his magic to try to really put a lot more pressure on South Korea than the Biden administration has.
Even if just looking at South Korea, even if just technically and logistically they are separated, administration positions matter, actually.
Of course.
Yeah, but help me understand how Trump's position on trade will be different from Biden, though.
Well, we have to remember that Biden has, of course, been very much a protectionist as well. Build Back Better and all of his infrastructure projects, the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS Act, they've all been in favor of American business interests. But Biden has also been fair. When it comes to the IRA, sure, they really protected American interests first, but eventually, after a lot of negotiations, there were exemptions made for South Korean businesses.
So they were willing to make negotiations.
Especially after South Korean companies started to invest and build factories in America and create American jobs.
Right, so he's more flexible than what Trump might be.
Yes, but will Trump be satisfied with what South Korean companies have given so far? Trump is never satisfied unless he's get 100% of everything. And so, yes, administrations matter.
Stay ahead in understanding South Korean politics, business and society with a Korea Pro subscription. Gain access to daily email newsletters, expert briefings and exclusive events designed for professionals like you. As a podcast listener, you can now try Korea Pro for free and subscribe at a discounted rate if you like what we're doing. Equip yourself with the insights that matter most. Visit koreapro.org/podcast to subscribe and ensure you never miss a critical update. Korea Pro, never be sidelined again.
And speaking of which, I feel like this was maybe a month ago, but I can't believe it was over the weekend. There was a assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump at a rally in Pennsylvania, right?
Yes, he was.
And this raised eyebrows in South Korea due to potential scenarios going forward, especially looking at the polls.
Well, we have to remember that whenever there is an assassination attempt, there is a little bit of a bump, a sympathy bump. And so there were some fears that this would actually help Trump's numbers go up in the polls.
Right, and they were neck and neck, right?
For a while. And if you look at the 538 polls, Trump is ahead of Biden. Trump is right now 42.3 and Biden is at 40.4, something along those lines. But it's not really clear if the assassination attempt will actually have permanent numbers. Trump has been leading Biden for a while.
And because this is Korea Pro podcast, what were some of the main concerns that South Korean media or experts were raising?
Well, the biggest one would be if Trump comes back, defense cost sharing. We've talked about this numerous times. Now, South Korea and the U.S. have had multiple rounds of the defense cost sharing so far this year. But if they cannot resolve this quickly, then they will have to continue on this discussion when Trump returns to office, if he returns to office. And so, again, that would likely bring back a lot of the old talking points that we heard 4 years ago. 500%, $5 billion, that kind of thing.
Right, and just moving on, because we have discussed Trump scenarios multiple times, how did the Democratic Party in South Korea took this? Because it's just months after Democratic Party leader who is running for the second term potentially was also hit on his neck with a knife?
He was stabbed in the neck with a knife.
How did they use the Trump assassination attempt into their own press releases?
I saw their spokesperson's comments, and they were talking about. Firstly, they described this attack as an act of terror.
And political violence.
Yes. Now,
And as did Yoon, right?
yes, but was it really terrorism? We don't know what the shooter's motivations were.
I think South Koreans have very shallow understanding of what terrorism is.
Sure, did he have a political manifesto, or did he just forget to take his meds? We don't really know just yet. The investigation is still ongoing. But they described it as an act of terror. And they were also saying that how this politics of hate has been driving this sort of violent tendencies in both the U.S. and in South Korea.
Didn't they blame media for that?
Yes, they did. A lot of conservative media has been using very harsh rhetoric about Lee Jae-myung, writing about his numerous court cases and allegations of involvement with North Korea through Sangbangul, the company, of course. And so they were saying that a lot of the politics of hate, a lot of the media coverage has led to this, and which is not all that different from what Republican talking points have been so far.
And also, just to be fair, progressive articles are like that too against Han Dong-un and everybody, right?
Yes, it was a case of the kettle calling the pot black.
Right. But they did issue several statements, both conservatives and progressives in South Korea, that something similar to what Nancy Pelosi also said, and all the major U.S. officials said, that violence has no place in this nation or democracy.
Well, it
But-
shouldn't have a place in a democracy, but apparently it does.
Somehow related in a sense that Washington, D.C. had a very busy week,
Right.
which is an understatement. But what happened with the indictment?
Well, the indictment of Sumi Terry, a former CIA analyst, and she was
White House senior official as well, and hired by multiple think tanks.
CFC and CFR, thank you, and the Wilson Center.
And the CSIS.
Yes. At least the allegation so far is that she had received multiple luxury goods and at least $37,000 from National Intelligence Service agents, National Intelligence being South Korea's intelligence service.
Right, and high-priced dinners, upscale restaurants, Michelin star sushi, blah, 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 right?
And again, the court document says that she had been providing non-public information
From the U.S.?
From the U.S. to South Korea, and that she had been using her position to get South Korean and U.S. officials together to meet, and also
happy hours and stuff.
Unofficially, and of course also to promote South Korean policies and talking points over the past 10 years.
Through media appearances and other cases. And the allegation is that she was receiving the aforementioned rewards for that. But it's quite puzzling if you look at the document, because it's been a decade, apparently. The period is a decade, more than a decade. And that includes, I think, 3 South Korean administrations.
Right. Now, of course, I'm not a member of the Secret Service or the CIA, despite what people might say on Twitter.
No, you'll be a horrible spy.
I would be a horrible spy. I can't even whisper. But yeah, she has not parroted South Korean talking points throughout these 10 years. Yes, she has talked about how the U.S. could approach both Koreas, and she has talked about policies advocating the U.S.-South Korea alliance, but she has also made a lot of criticisms towards South Korean governments in the past.
Yeah.
And so, was she a spy? Was she, as people seem to be saying on social media? I'm not quite sure if that's
Right, I think
the case.
Yeah, I think South Korean reporters were struggling how to write about this, because people in DC texted me immediately saying, what's the vibe like right now in South Korea? How are South Koreans taking it? It was pretty damn big, because there were breaking news alerts about this, about the indictment. And at first, all the headlines were saying 간첩 혐의, which is espionage allegation.
Right.
But after a few seconds, the editors apparently changed it to 정부 대리, which is proxy for government.
Right, because espionage is a very different
It's
word.
a loaded term in South Korea. It sort of immediately tells you, in South Korea, the connotation is that you were working for North Korea. So I think maybe to be clear on that, they were changing the term.
Well, even if there was no North Korea angle, to be a spy means to actually give really sensitive,
Right.
classified information.
Right, it was a loaded term. It sounded more like an influence operation, right?
Right.
And how has South Korean government reacted so far?
So far, there has been no reaction
Until this morning.
until this morning.
I haven't read the full note yet, but it seems there was a South Korean high-level official who briefed journalists about this, saying that this is Moon administration's fault because allegedly, this happened during the Moon administration, and quote, it's because the positions were filled with amateurs.
I'm sorry, but I'm pretty sure that I saw a picture of Sumiteri with former Foreign Minister Park Jin while they were screening Beyond Utopia.
And also, this started during Park Geun-hye administration.
Right, so just to blame this on the Moon administration, that doesn't
I think it
That
would
doesn't
have
smell
been. I
right.
think it would have been better if they just did no comment,
as they did yesterday.
as they did yesterday. But someone was itching to say something about the Moon administration, apparently, and I don't think that was a smart move.
Well, if they were smart.
And confirming that there are certain positions like that officially, and saying that they were filled with amateurs.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure, Jan.
Week ahead, we have a big domestic politics event next week.
Tuesday next week.
It will be in Ilsan Kintex, and John and I might go. It's a PPP Party Congress where they will be electing their new party leader.
The polls suggest that Han Dong-un, the former interim leader and former justice minister, might become the next leader.
Right. But I will write about this week. But the caveat here is that most of the opinion polls are based on randomized respondents.
And not just the party faithful, who are the actual ones who are going to vote.
Right. 80%, it seems, of the party congress vote will be, 80% will be the party members, and 20% will be either non-affiliated voters or PPP affiliated citizens who are responding to stuff like Gallup.
And there are plenty of people within the party who don't like Han.
Right, so we will have to see. Although Han Dong-un is leading in the polls, we don't know what's going to happen because we have seen in the past, like in terms of like DP primary, for example, everybody thought Lee Na-kyun was going to win, but party members didn't feel that way.
We were so young and innocent back then.
So keep an eye on that because for PPP, which is a ruling party, these party congress for the party leadership election, it's like a stepping stone for them to maybe start thinking about the presidential ambition as well.
And Han does have that. And if you'd like to know more, all of this information and more will be sent to your inboxes through the Week Ahead email on Monday afternoon, so please subscribe for more.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in.
If you want to know more, sign up for our daily executive briefings. We brief you on all you need to know from the past 24 hours and why they matter every morning in your inboxes.
Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast for your weekly dose of insight. And until next time, I'm Jeongmin Kim.
And I'm John Lay. Stay connected, stay informed, and we'll see you next time on the Great Pro Podcast.